Good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. With the 4th of July coming up, flags are waving all around the country, and that's a good thing to see. I like seeing them on our set, and I like seeing them around our neighborhoods, but they're not all the flags that you want to be seeing. There are Palestinian flags and Mexican flags, Iranian flags, flags representing Hamas and Hezbollah. These are the work of protesters often, many of them organized by radical socialist and communist groups. They go from city to city looking to stir up trouble. There doesn't seem to be any clear pattern or clear message other than if it's good for the country or for the work of President Trump, they're going to be against it, whatever it turns out to be for the day. I look at this dysfunction and I think, who are these people and why are they here? You know, in a lot of other countries, they wouldn't even be allowed to denigrate the country so openly. And I wonder, why is the legacy media so interested in wasting time on these rather scrappy-looking protesters, some of whom are paid to try to make it look like the country is crumbling? But the noise is also coming from some of our elected officials, Democrats in the Congress and state governments. Trump dismantled Iran's nuclear program. He negotiated a ceasefire, and he's ridding our country of thousands of criminals who came into the country when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris took the border down. I mean, there's a long way to go, but we are clearly a safer country now. So with that, I want to bring in our guest tonight. He's our friend from the Northeast. Yes, we have friends there. He's former Senator and Ambassador Scott Brown. Welcome back, Scott.
Hey, it's great to be on, Alan. Hello to you and all your viewers.
Well, Scott, we have discussed before the old Democratic Party and their lack of message, their drift to the far left, the progressive influences. But in this case, President Trump eliminated a nuclear threat that was in full development to wipe out Israel and then drop nukes on the U.S. How can any elected representative actually be on the side of Iran and ready to try to impeach President Trump? It seems baffling.
Well, I think the people that you're talking about need a history lesson. Back in 1801, Thomas Jefferson actually sent our naval fleet to the Barbary Coast because Barbary pirates were interfering with trade. And then you have all the, JFK, the Bay of Pigs, Clinton, Obama, Biden. Don't forget, President Obama made it a point without getting congressional authorization to go get bin Laden. And he did. And I remember when I was a senator, I walked up to him, I said, sir, you have big you-know-whats. And congratulations. You know, it was really a bold move. And I congratulated him, and as well as every other member of the Senate and House as well. There was no outcry that he didn't get congressional authority. And, you know, Obama dropped 26,000 bombs on various countries. Clinton, 75 Tomahawk missiles. So listen, what President Trump did was bold and courageous. Since they took over our embassy and blew it up and took hostages, presidents have said, we need to stop this. Iran has been an exporter of terrorism around the region and the world through Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. And it needed to be stopped, especially because they're saying death to America, death to Israel. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they would use it, period. We all know that. And President Trump was bold. He was decisive. It was a huge decision because, remember, there is peace through strength. And that's exemplified here. And the fact that the Democrats don't acknowledge that and give him that thanks as a result of very similar to President Obama. And more importantly, they don't even thank our service members who through this amazing mission. I thought I was reading like a Brad Thor novel or something. Just the action and the intricacies of doing what they're doing was unbelievable. So shame on them. He doesn't need authority. He has it.
Well, Senator Tim Kaine, Mark Warner, and Chris Van Hollen, and other Senate Democrats, they're calling the strikes reckless and unconstitutional. Is there any reason to think that this is anything but a knee-jerk reaction to Trump's success?
No, it's typical. They haven't found one thing that they agree with them on. They're zealously defending, criminal illegals so they don't get deported. Well, the Supreme Court's taking care of that, and then they're zealously fighting the president receiving any money whatsoever. Zealously fighting the big beautiful bill, which includes obviously the tax extenders. If we don't do it, it's going to be an economic nightmare. It's not a perfect bill. Everyone has their own special things that they want to work on, but instead of moaning and groaning, they should get involved and actually do it. No, it's not unconstitutional. If it were, then, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, President Obama, and JFK, they would all be, basically impeached. And it's just, it's just politics as usual. It's sad.
Well, after 12 days of war, we're in a fragile ceasefire now. Israel's long nightmare could be ending. The Pentagon spent a long time getting ready to take out Iran's nuclear program, as laid out by the Secretary of Defense. Listen to Secretary Hegseth.
This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security.
Iran's leadership has been thinned out. The Ayatollah is 86 and in bad health. He may not even be running the country now, as witnessed by the 2 missiles that were fired into Beersheba even after the ceasefire was announced. These are the same people who cried out death to America for decades and killed hundreds of Americans along the way. But all that said, do you think it's possible to put together an expanded version of the Abraham Accords when things settle down a bit?
Yeah, I thought what President Trump did on the Accords was really, really wonderful. And I absolutely think that's the case because remember, Iran was the bully in the region. As I said, exporting terrorism, just making things very difficult. So the other countries, the reason they built up the defenses was not because of us, it was because of Iran. And they were very concerned what a nuclear Iran would do. So behind the scenes, they're very, very, I believe, very happy. But publicly, they're going to kind of just be somewhat neutral a little bit and say, oh, geez, you shouldn't have done it. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But yeah, listen, I hope so. And remember, the president wants peace. And there would be no peace with Iran doing what they wanted to do, which was to gain a nuclear weapon and basically use it on us or one of their neighbors of Israel. And I'm not speaking just making stuff up in terms of, I don't know what I'm talking. I've been to Israel, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Israel, Dubai, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kuwait. I know the region. I understand the people there. Being on armed services, homeland veterans, being in the military for almost 4 decades, I understand the geopolitical as well as the military options and basically the things that we needed to do and get done. And the president was right. The Secretary Hegseth, who's a friend, did a great job, and they should be commended.
What about Israel? Do you think they'll get their hostages back, including maybe even the bodies of the hostages that were deceased?
Yeah, listen, bottom line is, had Hamas given them back a long time ago, Iran would not be in this situation. But they're playing games. And Hamas has been neutralized. You don't hear too much from the Houthis as well. Give the hostages back. Go and just go away. That's the easy answer. You give them back, then families have closure. It's a matter of pride that Netanyahu needs to get these. He promised to get them back, and I'm hopeful that they do that.
Well, Scott, please stay with us for another segment. There's a lot more to talk about. In the meantime, you can jump in on this conversation by hopping on ajnow.com and sending us an email. We read them all and answer as many as we can at the end of the show on air. We appreciate how you help us. You shape the program as we go forward. We'll be right back. How do we understand a world of turmoil and confusion and conflicting ideals? Well, I've written a new book that I think will help. It's called Angels, Demons, and You, Understanding Spiritual Influences in Our Lives. I don't believe a political understanding is sufficient to know what's happening in our world. We need to understand the spiritual forces that are impacting us every day. Well, I wrote this book to help you navigate that in a way that will bring God's victory into your life. Read it. I believe it'll be a blessing. We're back now with former Senator Scott Brown, longtime friend of the show. Scott, you were in the Ambassador Corps when you represented us in New Zealand. How difficult is it now for our ambassadors in the Mideast to operate? There's a legacy of so much distrust across that region. It can't be simple.
Well, there's only one ambassador I care about there, and that's our good friend Huckabee. The governor/ambassador. I texted him actually last week when they were lobbing missiles into that region and the part of the embassy was hit, and I asked him how he was doing, and he indicated they're hanging in there, but it's a lot of stress, and you can only imagine. But if there's anyone that's going to do an amazing job, it's Huck. He's so God loving, and And they got the right guy in there. So yeah, listen, it's a tough job being in the Middle East or many different parts of the country. I have so many incredible stories about when I served and the leaders that were there. A lot of them do it for the flag. They're career diplomats, and then like Huckabee and me, we're political appointees. We get to go back to our lives. A lot of these people, they do it for their entire lives, and they go to places that you don't want to go to, and they do it because they love this country and they love their jobs. So God bless them.
Amen. Well, there are new warnings here at home that the hundreds, perhaps even thousands of Iranian gotaways could be plotting a response to the U.S. involvement in the war. Tom Homan is working tirelessly to clear out the criminals and gang members, but even he's acknowledged that with 10 to 20 million people here illegally, Homeland Security has little idea where the Iranians might be hiding. Do you think Congress will give him the money he needs to expand this search?
Well, it's not just a money issue. It's obviously an involvement from citizens. The people that are running around with Iranian flags and Mexican flags, they're basically giving cover to those people. I understand that ICE today picked up, I think, 15 Iranians who, shouldn't be here. Clearly, we have to be vigilant to make sure that if you see something, you really do have to say something. You got to contact your neighbors, check on them, and, do our very best to prevent it. Obviously, the soft targets is where they like to go to because they're cowards. And whether it's a movie theater, a festival, that sort of thing. Our grid, our infrastructure systems, those are the things we need to be, really careful. And I know that in every state, regardless of your political party, the governors and their teams are doing an extra effort to make sure these things don't happen.
Well, President Trump took off for the NATO summit today. He's been pressing the NATO countries to pay more for the defense of Europe. Not just Iran and its proxies, but also Russia pressing for a takeover of Ukraine. The United States has as many as 100,000 troops throughout Europe at all times. And they're asking the other NATO members to put up 5% of their GDP to help pay for that. Most have stepped up, but Spain's president has said that's unreasonable and can only pay 2%. I'm curious, what do you think President Trump will tell him when they meet?
Well, obviously, 2% is the old floor. I mean, to think that you have countries that are much poorer than Spain, giving upwards of 3, 4, and hopefully 5%, it's kind of embarrassing. I would think they would want to, that pride, that Spanish pride, they would actually, step it up and make a contribution. Because what's happening with NATO, but not for President Trump speaking up and back in his first term, NATO would be at really a distinct disadvantage. And they're not. They're stronger militarily, they're stronger financially. And yeah, 5% is not a lot to ask, especially because of what's happening with Russia. They clearly want to expand and get back their old sphere of evil and influence. So they need to be there. It'll happen to them first. It doesn't affect us as much, but they need to do their part, do their fair share.
Well, Scott, you're a veteran of the political arena, and I want to ask you to comment on the chattering class in this new media environment. It's not just the legacy media that takes shots at everything the president does. There's a second layer now of self-appointed second guessers who are forever trying to get attention with their commentary. Most notably, it seems like of late, Tucker Carlson claimed, and I quote, that the first week of a war with Iran could easily kill thousands of Americans. Apparently he had no idea how effective the B-2 flights could be, or that Mr. Trump could get a ceasefire in place in just 12 days. It seems like there's just noise everywhere. Isn't there? Is there any solution to this?
Well, yeah, you can become Russia and censor everything of China. But no, listen, we live in a democracy, freedom of speech, Second Amendment. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. I try to make, statements based on fact and what I actually know versus, kind of guessing. But you're entitled to your opinion. And it's easy to Monday morning quarterback. But bottom line is that didn't happen. And there were no casualties. There were none, 0 American casualties. And they did, went from Missouri, did the hit, and we're back by dinner time. It's phenomenal what they actually did. And I'm thankful that we actually had that opportunity to kind of hopefully, knock on wood, neutralize those nuclear sites and basically defang Iran, because they're the big bully exporter of terrorism around the region of the world, and it needs to stop in order to have a vibrant Middle East, because a lot of those countries want to move on. They want AI, they want alternative sources of power, they want to diversify off the oil, because one day it may not be there. And I think that's a good thing. And Iran has a chance. I mean, it's a beautiful country. I mean, beautiful shorelines, wonderful Persian people, but, you know, they've been in a regime that's oppressive. I mean, you don't wear the right clothes, they take your eye out. I mean, come on. We can do better.
Well, Scott, we're about out of time, but one quick question. Iran spent 45 years trying to eliminate Israel and diminish America. Do you think there's any chance at all that their current leadership will honor a ceasefire?
Well, you know, I think they really need to at this point, because President Trump made it really clear. And I know there was a launching of a couple of missiles that one got through. And so, the Israelis just went and they found the launchers and they went at it. You know, so listen, I hope so. I pray every night that we resolve this issue. But they don't have many friends. And if they want to get into the world graces and they want to be a world power and a world leader, then they're going to have to, you know, hopefully change things there. The people will make that decision. Obviously, we're not going to do a regime change. So, you know, hopefully.
Well, Scott Brown, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming back on with us today.
You're welcome. All right, God bless.
And in a moment, I'll have some thoughts of my own. There's hope in the air. Hey, I want to give you a personal invitation to join my podcast, Culture and Christianity.
For a person to think that the Bible is not political, you don't know the Bible.
We're trying to understand how to take our faith outside the walls of the church and live it out in the marketplace.
He will show you what to do, whether it's in our communities, in our country, or other places in the world.
So I brought in some friends, some people that are trying to do this.
How could anyone call themselves Christian and be pro-choice? Is beyond my comprehension.
But I think he wanted them open and in need of him every day.
We have been living through a season of unprecedented deception, propaganda, manipulation.
Everybody says, oh, Israel is attacking schools in the Gaza Strip.
I want to be a part of seeing culture and Christianity intersect. Hope you enjoy the podcast. I am most grateful that my friend Mike Huckabee is the U.S. ambassador to Israel. He's a Christian man who loves the state of Israel, and he knows the biblical perspective regarding that land. He's also a man who's not afraid to speak the truth and to call out lies and deception. But perhaps history books will remember Ambassador Huckabee for a text message that he sent to President Trump just a few days before the U.S. bombed nuclear facilities in Iran. President Trump posted a screenshot of this text message on social media. In the message, Ambassador Huckabee reminded President Trump that although many voices are advising him on Israel, only one voice matters. His voice referring to the voice of God. Well, Huckabee wrote he believes Trump was spared by God last July when a would-be assassin failed to fatally strike the president while he was campaigning for re-election in Butler, Pennsylvania. Huckabee was willing to put his reputation and his political equity on the line when he spoke up for Israel, much like the biblical heroine Queen Esther did when she pleaded with the Persian king to not allow for the annihilation of the Jewish people to proceed as it had been planned. Well, here's something else to consider. Huckabee was only in the position to have the ear of the president because he said yes to an invitation to move to Israel, to leave his peaceful life in Arkansas with his children and his grandchildren in order to take on the challenge of being the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Well, I bring this up because I believe God presents new invitations to us as well. Have you ever sensed that God was speaking to you and inviting you toward something? Maybe not to be an ambassador, but on a regular basis, you and I are presented with an opportunity to say yes to God, yes to obedience. If we'll do that, I believe there are far more reasons for hope than despair. In a moment, we'll be back with your emails. Just a reminder, if you miss an episode, you can go to ajnow.com. There's a full archive there. You can choose the shows. You can even send a link to a friend. Invite a friend to watch the program. The more, the merrier. Your emails are good. Joan C. in Pennsylvania asked, will you please consider interviewing Mike Huckabee? I would appreciate that, and I'm sure many others would. You have a great show. Thanks. Well, we had the ambassador scheduled for a program. In fact, I was traveling Jerusalem to do it live with the governor, and war broke out They canceled our flights, and the governor and the ambassador, they've been a bit busy, but in due time, we'll get him back on TBN. Randy from Oceanside, California wrote, our church showed a documentary on the October 7th Hamas invasion. And at the very end, there was a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. I asked our pastor how we were to respond based on that quote, and his answer was we need to act in love and that we're not to make this political. Bonhoeffer seemed to make that quote political. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Well, time limits all of my thoughts. That's probably better for all of us. I don't think there's any way to understand the biblical truth unless we live it out in the midst of the culture where we are. And my experience is people who don't agree with the biblical worldview, a Judeo-Christian worldview, when we talk about current events, they say we're being political. I don't agree. I don't think a conversation about a biblical view on marriage is political at all. I believe that's a biblical topic. I think when we talk about there being only two biological sexes, I don't think that's political at all. I think it's a biblical worldview. When we talk about the Jewish people having a historic God-given right to a piece of land at the end of the Mediterranean, I don't think that's political at all. I think that's a biblical worldview. If we take the books out of our Bible that don't deal with the cultures that were present when the authors were alive, you'd lose most of the books of your Bible. I think the church has been cowardly in hiding behind theology for far too long, and that's a significant contributor to why we're in this fine mess we're in. Have the courage to tell the truth wherever God takes you, and the world will be a better place. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us this evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and I pray you have a wonderful evening.